achieved.
Welcome to the Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions UFC International Fight Week post show. It's a little bit late in coming, but with all of those events that went down in such a short period of time, I was thoroughly exhausted and absolutely needed to step away from my. You probably noticed an absence from my website. Step away and take a break from breaking down, watching fights, breaking down fights, predicting fights, some right, some wrong, and doing bet packs and all that stuff. I had to take a step away because we turn around and do it again very, in the not too distant future for another matchup, another big card. But on this episode of the show, or this post-fight recap, I'm going to be talking about events that transpired with UFC Fight Night 90, the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale, of course, the monumental UFC 200, and the most recent event, UFC Fight Night 91. There's a couple other things I'm going to touch upon as well. I'll talk about my performances by fighters, and all those situations, and we will go from there. First, I want to touch upon, obviously, one of the biggest pieces of news coming around this week, the sale of the UFC. It's absolutely massive. Dana White, obviously, still involved. That was a big question. Is Dana White still going to be part of the organization? He's still going to stay on as president. He's claiming it'll be more work. I think it'll be very interesting to see how that dynamic works, in that now he works for somebody who I'm sure they have a good relationship, but I don't think he's buddy-buddy like he is with the Fertittas. Again, this all will play out in its own time, but I think they might look at Dana and say, look, you're the president of the company. We know what you did in the past. You've done great stuff for MMA, but here's some of the things we don't like that you did. Here's some of the things you said in the media that you can't do now as our employee. We'll see if that transpires. We'll see if they just say, business as usual, as Uncle Dana likes to talk about all the time. Nonetheless, it should be very interesting going forward to see how that transpires. There's always the situation with the Reebok deal. It's been rumored that the Reebok deal could be coming to a premature end based on this new organization, the new ownership of the UFC, wanting to go in a different direction. Very interested to see what that direction is. Do they let things go back to how it used to be with fighters getting their own sponsors, wearing their own gear, which I would all be 100% in favor of? Do they find another sponsorship, like a sponsor like Nike, to come in and take over the designing of the clothing and everything like that? They become less, more lenient as far as what fighters can wear. It's just very interesting to see what is, what comes out of this, because from my standpoint and from a lot of people's standpoints, the Reebok deal has been anything but a success, and I can't imagine a new organization or new ownership coming in will want to continue that if they have the opportunity to get out. Now, I will say this. I did enjoy a little bit more seeing the different colors UFC 200 and the events after that. UFC Fight Night 91, we also saw a little bit as well. The different colored shorts. I would like to see that go that much further. Start incorporating more uniqueness into design if Reebok does elect to continue. And I think that's very important going forward, but we'll see where that goes. A couple other big... sort of continue with the UFC sale. I'd also like to see, maybe we'll see what markets they want to get into, what markets they try and pull back from. Do they look to focus more on overseas, more on the North America and specifically the US? How does that go? I've always held out for it. I know Bellator was big on this, and they've kind of changed. Now that Bellator's not doing this, I would love to see the UFC get into the business of tournaments. 8-man tournaments held over 6 months. Take guys that are maybe ranked in the bottom part of the top 15, and guys just on the outside. Put up $100,000 to the winner. Put them in 8 men, maybe have or 8 women, whoever, have some extra cash set up on the side, or extra fight set up on the side, and gives the fighters an opportunity. Maybe you don't win a title, but you get a shot with 3 wins to cash in an extra $100,000. That definitely serves as a motivator. And another thing I'd like to see as well is finishing bonuses put in place for every single fighter. Not just fight of the night, not just performance of the night. Make it so you get paid $10,000. If you're on a $10,000, you're $10,000 to fight, you're $10,000 to win, and you're $10,000 to finish. And you want to see fighters go out there and risk their neck. That would be huge. The other thing is guaranteed contracts. Will that come into play where it says you sign a 3-fight contract, you lose all 3 of those fights? Well, obviously, we're probably not going to re-sign you, but you got to fight all 3 times. You signed a 5-fight contract. Unless you want out of that contract, you opt to retire, you're fighting to the end of that contract, or at least we can come to a mutual termination point. And it gives fighters security and makes them realize we go out here, if we risk it all to try and knock a guy out and we get knocked out in the process, we're not going to lose our job, because I know I still have 2 fights left on my contract. Just things like that. We'll see if we have a trickle-down effect from the new management, or if it is business as usual going forward. Okay? Well, that's definitely the first point of interest. Obviously, now 2 other big names turning UFC 200 I want to talk about individually. The first being Jon Jones. Jon Jones testing positive, or at least levels indicating that there could be something there, that USADA is stepping up and basically pulled him on the verge. And I remember where I was when that came up. It was late at night when it popped up online. I was breaking down on my last fights, and I just was absolutely dumbfounded that this was happening. I thought, my goodness, I was very much looking forward to this matchup. I was much in a situation where we were close to the start of UFC 200. All my work had been put in, and now this happens. Jon Jones, the type of guy, he's a natural talent, but clearly he's done more than just... He's created his success more on just his natural abilities, if you will, if this is the case. He's risen to the top of the UFC light heavyweight division, one of the most exciting fighters to come along in a long time, and now there's all these questions about, did he do it naturally? Was it based on performance-enhancing drugs? What is the situation? How does this guy stay clean? It's just very disappointing. And, what happens going forward? Do they risk putting him in a main event again? Do they even bother with Daniel Cormier and offering that fight again, or do they just move on altogether? Do they release him? Full well knowing Bellator is going to swoop in and sign him immediately and give him an opportunity. Daniel Cormier, big thing with him is no matter what he does the rest of his career, even if he dominates the light heavyweight division until he retires, there'll always be that. You lost to Jon Jones, you're not the true champion because you couldn't beat him. And then he beat him, basically Johnny Bones Jones beat himself and took himself out of the running. So there's that big controversy as far as Daniel Cormier's career surrounding this as well. What I'd like to see happen, I'd like to see Jones legitimately get cleaned up. Obviously, I think that's what a lot of people want to see. Get him back in the mix. He doesn't deserve a title shot right away. He doesn't even deserve a main event spot. Make him fight 2 to 3 times in lower level fights. Headline a fight night. Make him start over, and eventually get back to the point where it's like, yeah, you fought 2 or 3 times. You've been tested. You are clean. You have become a dependable human being again, and here is your opportunity. That's just me. I'm a fight fan. That's just me. And finally, news that just percolated through the media downspout in the last 24 to 48 hours. Brock Lesnar testing, or again, popping, pissing hot, if you will. Whatever came up to suggest there was a red flag. He's been flagged by USADA again, suggesting he is taking something. And I did comment. I was sitting with my brother-in-law and mother-in-law. We were watching the event, and I commented. I said, Brock looks fantastic. Physically, he looks better than he did last time he was here. He looks as good as he did when he was at the pinnacle of his career, the peak of his career, if you will. It's damn impressive how good he looks for a guy who's significantly older than the last time we saw him fighting in the UFC. And now this. Not surprising whatsoever, unfortunately. His performance, we'll talk about that momentarily. But nonetheless, I want to see how this plays out. And I anticipate he'll be done. He's going to walk away. He's not going to come back to the organization. He's not going to, services. He's going to say, that's it. I got my chance to come. I proved to myself, in whatever convoluted viewpoint as far as what he took to get himself physically to that point, he proved to himself what he could do, and he's happy with that. He's moving on. I don't want a title shot. I don't want an opportunity to fight Cain Velasquez again. I'm just, I'm done with it. So there we are. So that's some of the things I want to touch upon before we get into the actual minutia of each event. But let's break them down now, starting with UFC Fight Night 90. So first, looking at UFC Fight Night 90, which was headlined by the lightweight title fight between Eddie Alvarez and the former champion Rafael dos Anjos. Overall, from a prediction standpoint, I went 8-4. I was 8-2 going into the final 2 fights tonight, which was very disappointing to see how those played out. And we'll talk about that momentarily. It's crazy to think that the event started with 5 consecutive wins by submission. Damn impressive. Very good, nice submissions as well, a couple of which I predict, especially Vicente Luque and Gilbert Burns. Felipe Arantes' performance was damn. I also predicted Pedro Munoz to win by submission, so I predicted 3 of those 5 fights and by submission. Overall, it was a good start to the card, and I very much enjoyed those matchups, and it was a good way to kick off International Fight Week. John McDessie picking up that split decision over Mehdi Baghdad. Shocking for John McDessie's track record. He fights in a style that if he doesn't finish his opponent, it's a very competitive fight, whether it should be or not. He got hurt a couple times. I was really shocked that he got the nod in that matchup. I fully expected when I could tell it was going to a split decision, because you can usually tell it takes a little bit longer to compile the data and make sure everything is straightforward and understood before they actually announce the result. And I usually say, that's a split decision coming down the pipe there. And I was like, McDessie's lost this fight. He'll get a nod from one judge. That's not. I was shocked to see. So Canadian boy picking up a win that prolongs his UFC career, because he certainly was in need of a big victory here. The Roy Nelson, Derek Lewis match. Actually, before quickly, Alan Jouban versus Bilal Muhammad. That was a hell of a fight. And the disappointing thing was I had Jouban to finish him. I had a couple prop bets going on, some money on the line that involved Jouban picking up the stoppage. So seeing him drop an opponent 3 times and not be able to get the job done was disappointing. Nonetheless, that shows how tough Muhammad is, and we will certainly remember his name as his nickname would indicate. Co-main event, Derek Lewis taking on Roy Nelson. Of course, I picked Roy Nelson. This is when I was 8-2, and figuring even if I split the final 2 fights, If I can go 9-3, that's a heck of a good start to UFC International Fight Week. But Derek Lewis got the nod in a split decision win. Roy Nelson used a game plan I talked about heavily. Takedown, takedown, takedown. The disappointing factor was he did not land enough strikes on the feet or on the mat. He didn't do enough. And Lewis is a tough dude. He's able to carry that cardio much better than a lot of big heavyweights. He got deep into that fight. He hit Roy Nelson with a motherfucking huge punch that would have killed most average men, and Roy Nelson ate it for lunch. Yeah, he flipped his head back, but he was fine. Not really, but you know what I'm saying. And Lewis was able to come back, shake off some bad moments where he was put on his back and clearly exhausted, and rally and take that fight. And, you know, to me, as much as I like Roy Nelson, as much as I picked Roy Nelson to win that matchup, he was trying to grind out a victory in the least fighting way as possible, where Derek Lewis was still trying to throw down, trying to hurt him. And I think they got this. Judges, disappointingly for me as much as it is, the judges got the decision proper. Main event time, Eddie Alvarez versus Rafael dos Anjos. A lot of people talk about Eddie Alvarez being the certainly a live dog. He certainly showed that he was a live dog and stopped Rafael dos Anjos in the opening round. Dos Anjos looked good for the first opening few minutes, and then Eddie Alvarez hurt him and finished him. And a lot of people have pointed out saying maybe RDA is another example of a fighter who was capable but unable to break out of the pack of talented lightweights. Maybe did something on the side, not saying anything, maybe used something to help him to improve his performance, if you will, and push him through to the next level. Got to that next level, looked like a fucking monster, taking out guys like, destroying Anthony Pettis, taking out fighters like Donald Cerrone and Benson Henderson prior to winning the title, and then Nate Diaz as well, thrashing him around the cage, and then boom, Eddie Alvarez takes him out in relatively short order. So we'll see how Dos Anjos rebounds, but obviously I can't anticipate them giving RDA a rematch right away. Even though he was a pretty successful champion, I would think he'd fight again sometime to prove his moxie. Nonetheless, Eddie Alvarez, the new UFC lightweight champion, finished me 8-4 overall on that night. The bet packs had two major parlays that missed out on one leg, which was incredibly disappointing, but still, that's gambling. That's how it goes. It was disappointing, but we moved on. And so on that note, let's move on to our next event breakdown. Our next event took place on July 8th, which was the Friday night. It was the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale, and it was one of my best shows in recent memory. 9 fights I predicted. I did not predict the three Ultimate Fighter related fights simply because I didn't have enough time to invest in those matchups. So I focused elsewhere. But of the 9 fights I predicted, I went a very solid 8-1. And the bet packs were huge. 294 units won. So that meant if you bet $10 per unit, the way I lay things out for you, you won just short of $3,000 on that event. Obviously, there's people who, and I've talked to these people, they bet a lot more per unit, and those people cashed in huge. If you're a fantasy player, my fantasy numbers were pretty solid. My top team scored 434 points on DraftKings. You know, there were some contests where you had to be close to 500 points. You had to be pushing 500 to walk away with the win. Still, 434, it got me some cash, so I'm sure it got other people cash if they used those lineups. My props were solid, 5-2. My value bets, I nailed the first 4 value bets of the night, and you can certainly check that out. They're all posted and available at my website, and they will be tagged. I believe they will be linked as well in the on the post at Kamikaze Overdrive that night if you want to check it out. But it was a huge, awesome bet pack for that night for the Ultimate Fighter 23. Now let's take a look at some of the fights. Kevin Lee versus Jake Matthews, the second fight of the night. I picked Kevin Lee to pull off the upset. I thought he'd do it by decision. He took out Jake Matthews in the opening round via TKO. Impressive performance by Kevin Lee, but there's actually a little connection there with myself. I was flattered to be involved in this. I had noticed when I was just kind of flipping through my social media incoming messages, Jake Matthews, the UFC fighter Jake Matthews, actually followed me. He was the first UFC fighter to follow me on Twitter. I was proud. I was excited. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I feel bad picking against him when he follows me. And it was, the Saturday. It was the Saturday before, the weekend before that he had followed me. And, I've picked him in the past. I picked against him in the past with mixed results. And then I went to click on his name when I was going through, and I noticed Jake Matthews had blocked me. Shortly after following me, he had blocked me and unfollowed me, obviously. And I guess that had something to do directly with the fact that I picked against him. And I talk about all the fighters when I pick them. I talk about their positives or negatives, and I just pick with my head. And I say, I can't pick everybody to win. That would just be stupid. But I basically said, okay, this is what I think Jake Matthews does well. This is what Kevin Lee does well. This is how this fight's going to turn out. I have Kevin Lee winning by decision. And I actually sent a quick tweet out to Kevin Lee, explained the situation. He was he made sure to point that out to Jake Matthews as well, went on to pick up the victory, so congratulations, Kevin Lee. And Jake Matthews, no hard feelings. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I absolutely would be totally cool with it. Not that I'm anticipating you will, not to worry. Next, a couple other noteworthy fighters in this card. There were several. Ho Choi, what a fucking beast. The guy looks like a grad student, a kid in grade 7 that I've probably yelled at some point in time. Very, as I tweeted to Robin Black, who also followed me. Thank you very much, Robin Black, for following me on Twitter. That's very cool. Robin Black did some excellent breakdowns of Choi's capabilities, and I tweeted to him and I said, look, this guy is a fucking a wolf in sheep's clothing. He looks so simple. The last guy in the audience you'd pick to be a monster as far as knocking guys out and destroying opponents, and he is a beast when he gets inside that cage. And he not only did he knock out Thiago Tavares, who's a very capable veteran fighter, but Tavares tested. He took him on the mat. Choi was able to defend, remained calm, got back to his feet, cut off the cage, and obliterated him, took him out. Choi is a dark horse at featherweight, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does going forward. There's definitely some huge fights for him in the future. If mixed martial arts, Asian mixed martial arts, at least MMA and the UFC is going to ride a fighter into notoriety, that's a big one right there. I think Choi has a lot of potential ahead of him, and as he becomes more active, I think a lot of people are going to jump on the Korean Superboys bandwagon. I am already there. I'm not driving it, but I am certainly there. Also, Will Brooks, big win for the former Bellator champion. He took out Ross Pearson. I picked him by decision, one of my big prop bets in that matchup. I took him by decision. And it was a hard-fought matchup. A lot of people criticized his performance. Look, it's a tough situation. You are coming in as an organization, a former champion from an organization, coming into the UFC where you're not a small fish, but you're certainly a smaller fish in a much, much bigger pond, a much bigger talent pool. And the pressure is on for you to come and perform. We saw what happened with Luke Rockhold, losing to Vitor Belfort, coming into the UFC as the Strikeforce champion. Will Brooks fought a battle-tested, and capable veteran in Ross Pearson, who really pushed him. And Brooks persevered and got the job done in a very, very tough and entertaining fight. So good for Will Brooks. Obviously, with Eddie Alvarez becoming the new UFC champion, that opens the door for Will Brooks to work his way back into an opportunity to fight Eddie Alvarez in a matchup that never transpired in Bellator. Main event time. Wow. I'm going to glaze over the two Ultimate Fighter fights. Hopefully they become something. It's disappointing when you see light heavyweights knowing they're going to go down to middleweight, and the one winner, Andrew Sanchez, even suggests he could go as low as welterweight. Whew. Do some shows with light heavyweight, or sort of heavyweights, to hopefully produce some light heavyweights going forward. But main event time, women's strawweight title fight. What a fantastic matchup. And this actually broke down very close to what I expected it to. I talked about if this was a 3-round matchup, I'm on Claudia Gadelha, just like I was when they first fought. She has the ability to grind out Joanna over a couple of rounds and take a decision. And had this been a 3-round fight for the title, which is impossible, we are looking at a new champion. Claudia clearly took control of Joanna in the opening 2 rounds, dominated her with her ground game, and then her cardio gave out. And Joanna persevered, survived, endured, got on her feet, got on her horse or bicycle, whatever you want to say, and went to work with her striking and got that fight back, retained her title in impressive fashion. She is a fighter I love watching. Claudia Gadelha, I absolutely love watching her, but you almost look at that situation and you say it's so unfortunate for her that her cardio won't allow her to hold up over 5 rounds, or even over 3 rounds against a champion like Joanna. She has to improve her striking. She has to improve her cardio to the point where she can mix them together, not blow her gas tank out, and get those 3 to 4 rounds in the books definitively that she's going to need to win the title. I think we'll see them fight again. Not for a while. I think Claudia's pretty much number 2 in that division. I'd like to see her go back. I'm curious to see how she'll fare against other top-ranked fighters within the division, especially over 5 rounds. For example, Claudia Gadelha versus Rose Namajunas in a 5-round fight would be a hell of a matchup. I'd really look forward to seeing. I'd love to watch that fight. Very interesting. But nonetheless, Joanna moving on to bigger and better things. There's a lot of other title challengers out there in the women's strawweight division, and if you don't like women's MMA, I don't know what to tell you, because that was a fantastic fight. Far better than a lot of men's fights we've seen in recent memory, and I very much look forward to both girls taking the cage again. I lost a ton of money in that matchup as well. I picked Joanna to stop her, and I already won some, and I had prop bets. I had huge parlays coming down to one fight, and I picked Joanna to finish her inside the distance, and she couldn't get the job done. And it's in rounds 4 and 5, it was excruciating, because you could watch Gadelha coming forward and so exhausted and taking punishment. I'm just like, girl, you're a tough fighter, but go down. I need you to go down. just be done with it. And she just kept persevering. She's a tough cookie. And unfortunately, my pockets were a little bit lighter as a result. Nonetheless, fantastic event. Overall 8-1. But moving on to UFC 200 next, that is where the fantastic roll stopped for me. Our next fight was the event was the monumental UFC 200. I went 5-7. Not a great record. And it's unfortunate to think I started 2-0. I started off on a very, very solid run, 2-0 with 2 big wins to start, both picking them to end by finish, which they did. And, it is what it is. Some nights you have it, some nights you don't. And I don't want to make excuses, but sometimes when you're picking fights that are full of well-known fighters, you kind of look at, well, Miesha Tate should win the title because she's Miesha Tate. She should retain her title because she's meant to be on top of the division at the very least, compared to, Amanda Nunes, who's nobody. I know who she is. A lot of people know who she is now, but she certainly doesn't have that profile, that cachet that Miesha Tate has, or Ronda Rousey, or even to a lesser extent Holly Holm. But it's hard to look past that sometimes and predict fighters based on their technical abilities and what they bring to the cage. But we'll talk about that shortly. So it's certainly the yellow mat. What the fuck? I like that they changed it up. For some reason, I kept thinking Cage Warriors. I don't know if I remember seeing footage of Cage Warriors having yellow mat or just European MMA somewhere. It just threw me off. The thing, if you're going to go with the yellow mat, all the logos should have been black. Take the colors of all the other logos, make them all black, and then, okay, it looks sharp. It just looked like a very big mismatch of... This was probably something Dana White... I think Dana White took credit for it, came up with it at the last second. I was like, yeah, let's do this. Okay. Oh, that doesn't look great. Okay, we'll roll with it, whatever. Especially when you had all the new colors from the pant. It just took away from the look of it overall to me. What else is worth mentioning before I get into it? The undercard was pretty damn fantastic. But Johny Hendricks... Interesting. Johny Hendricks... What has happened? He looked like a monster when he was working his way up the ranks. Got to face George St. Pierre. Lost a fight in very controversial fashion. A couple of wars with Robbie Lawler. Nice win against Matt Brown. But he has not, and Carlos Condit in there as well, he's not looked the same in a long time. And he looks, is the weight cut? Is he having issues keeping his weight to a point where he can manage it? I know he's only over by 0.25 pounds, but he really worked his butt off to get down to that limit and probably drained himself out. But you have to start wondering, when you look at his physical composition, is there something else that's missing? I don't like pointing fingers. I've said it a couple times in the show with different fighters. You just wonder, with this new anti-doping standpoint the UFC has been brought in, and with the number of fighters being caught, are some of our other top-ranked fighters, top competing fighters that were up at the pinnacle of the sport, are they headed for a hard fall, and is Johny Hendricks one of them? Very good, interesting question. I don't know. Obviously, Johny Hendricks actually did an interview, so on my site a couple years ago, he answered a bunch of questions that I posted on the site. Thank you very much for that, Johnny. But he didn't look yourself. He didn't look very good. He had his moments where he started to rally, but Kelvin Gastelum took it to him. I think that was a tailor-made matchup for the old Johny Hendricks to win. Better wrestling, more power in his striking. His combinations were so much better when he fought Robbie Lawler, who's the champion. Kelvin Gastelum made him look old and beaten and broken. Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar. Jose Aldo's back the champion. Again, he's another fighter. Looked physically much better than the last time we saw him. Interesting. Very interesting that way. Again, not pointing fingers, but Frankie Edgar, it's got to be tough for Frankie to have all that momentum to get back to a title fight with so much success. What was it? 5 consecutive wins, including taking out Chad Mendez, and fights Jose Aldo. I picked Frankie Edgar to win that fight. I was wrong, big time. And I don't know if Frankie looked worse than when he fought Aldo the first time, but the leaps and the gains that I had calculated going into this fight that were based on how he performed the first time and how he's improved since with all the extra time at 145 pounds against noteworthy competition, they weren't there. And he didn't get that slowdown from Jose Aldo after round 2, and you could tell pretty much at that point this fight was over, because Frankie wasn't hitting him enough, wasn't going to stop him, wasn't going to outwork him, and Jose Aldo was right there the entire time, and really, it was an impressive performance. It wasn't overwhelming. He was just better than Frankie Edgar, start to finish. That's all it comes down to. Daniel Cormier versus Anderson Silva. I picked Anderson Silva to win that fight. That was my mistake. I did my entire write-up about Daniel Cormier winning the fight based on how he won it, using his takedowns being too physical for Anderson Silva, being too big. Anderson Silva coming off the couch with 2 days to prepare for this matchup, and it was really short-sighted on my... whatever. I felt Anderson would have success working his distance striking, keeping Cormier at bay with the threat of what he throws out there. And then once Cormier closed in, if Cormier didn't get the initial takedown off a shot and he worked in the clinch, Anderson would have success landing elbows and knees and short-range punches. And I was fully anticipating to see Daniel Cormier move forward and Anderson land a counter straight right or a push kick to the face of the midsection and land something that stopped him. And we saw that liver kick late in the fight, and that proves Daniel Cormier's point. Why would I stand with Anderson Silva when I can dominate him on the mat and pick up a win where a loss would forever tarnish his standings going forward? He couldn't risk that loss, and he certainly didn't. He went about it. He won the fight the way he should have. Anderson showed flashes of brilliance, especially at the end when he landed that liver kick, but it's Anderson Silva. He's out there for a paycheck. He got his money. He had an opportunity to spoil the party with Daniel Cormier. You had to wonder where Daniel Cormier's head was at after the Jon Jones fiasco. And it is what it is. Good for Daniel Cormier to get the win. Good for Anderson Silva to show up and save the event. Thanks, guys, for that fight. Brock Lesnar, Mark Hunt. Obviously, I've already talked about Brock Lesnar's situation. No need to spend any more time on that. He took rounds 1 and 3. Mark Hunt winning round 2. I had Mark Hunt win that fight by knockout. Mark Hunt never looked comfortable. You could see the threat of a takedown from a monstrous man like Brock Lesnar scared the shit out of him. Or didn't scare him, it made him apprehensive. It made him apprehensive and unwilling to engage. And that was something that interesting, Bellator just announcing that Patricky Pitbull is going to take on the bigger Pitbull. He's going to take on Benson Henderson. That's a good fight. I look forward to that. Back to this one. Mark Hunt just looked like he was unwilling to commit on his strikes, and Brock Lesnar avoided enough and was able to set up his takedowns in round 1 and 3 where he got them down. He kept them down, and that's all it came down to. Good for him. Brock Lesnar picking up that win means nothing at this point. It means nothing to Brock Lesnar because of what's going on. It certainly means something to Mark Hunt because now he's the guy who had been on the couch for 5 years and doing pro wrestling, returned to action and beat him. And that really hurts for Mark Hunt, and I hope Mark Hunt gets paid if Brock Lesnar does pop. The UFC needs to make that up to him. He took that fight. They claimed he was clean. Clearly he wasn't, if that turns out to be the case, and Mark Hunt needs to be compensated as a result. Amanda Nunes, Miesha Tate for the title. A lot of talk about Miesha Tate's weight cut. Narrowly, just about missed the 10 a.m. cutoff. Looked like hell. Had to strip naked to make the weight, make 135 pounds. There are images surfacing of her looking like absolute dog shit, trying to get down, trying to cut down, and her performance was lackluster, to say the least. Amanda Nunes is damn violent, damn terrifying, and good for her. Congratulations, first openly gay champion. That's wonderful. She's a hell of a fighter. How marketable is she? I don't know. We'll see what the UFC has a Brazilian fighter to go back to Brazil with, and that would be a smart move to make sure that next fight for Amanda Nunes is in her home country to help build it that way, because she's not Ronda Rousey, she's not Miesha Tate, she's not even Holly Holm as far as marketability is concerned, but she's a fucking monster. She's a head-smashing beast. And that's fun. That's nice. I like that. She's not going to talk a lot of trash. I like how she called Dana White on the shit, saying you didn't believe me when I told you to be the champion, and I went out and won it anyway. But as far as her next fight is concerned, don't be surprised if it's not against Ronda Rousey if that's the avenue they opt to go with. It won't be Miesha Tate. It won't be Holly Holm, because they certainly don't want Holly Holm recapturing the title. And then, because let's call a spade a spade. Miesha Tate was on the verge of losing that match against Holly Holm, and Ronda Rousey got absolutely dominated. If Holly Holm wins that title back, she may hold on to it for a while if she's able to clean up her grappling defense against Miesha Tate in a rematch if they were to square off. And she might head kick Ronda Rousey into oblivion. So there you go. I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC matches up Ronda Rousey with Nunes if she's able to come back. If Amanda wants to sit out that long, and the UFC does Miesha Tate versus Holly Holm 2, with the hopes that Miesha is able to finish Holly again, defeat her again, setting up Ronda Miesha 2 in the UFC. And then they go from there. Kat Zingano, of course, losing. Juliana Pena picking up a huge victory. And that's something interesting. I had one of my followers wrote me and said, look, here's a question for you. Here's a list of 4 underdogs. If you had to make a parlay of 2 of them, who would it be? The underdogs were Travis Brown, Juliana Pena, Amanda Nunes, and I can't remember off the top of my head who the other one was. I said go Pena Nunes. I looked at both of them as legit people that could walk away with the title under the proper circumstances. Being Nunes getting the fight won in the first round and a half, which she did, and Pena being able to get on top of Kat Zingano and hold her down, which I didn't anticipate she could, but she did. After Kat Zingano's basically her opening round looked the way I expected the entire fight to go. Okay. So again, UFC 200 so-so. It didn't blow my mind. It wasn't fantastic. It was fun. There was some down points. There were some hard to watch moments. We've seen a lot better action. I would love to see Robbie Lawler involved with this card. And of course, there's everybody talking about Nate Diaz. Conor McGregor would have made for a much better main event. Would a main event that would have happened and not had a carousel of changes. Yeah, that was disappointing, but it is what it is. It's MMA. It's not mixed martial arts. Sorry, it's MMA. It's not WWE. It's not all scripted. It's not all laid out to play out exactly the way we want it to play out every time, and that's what we get. I want to quickly spend some time on UFC Fight Night 91, and I want to wrap this up because it's been a long time, and I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. And now Wednesday night, it's not officially part of UFC International Fight Week. I counted it because that's 4 events in 6 days. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of fights in a short period of time. So I included it in my post-fight and talked about it. I will talk about it as such. Overall, I went 5-7. I went 5-7 again. I started 2-0 again, and 2 major upsets. Alex Nicholson and Hani Yahya. Nicholson, Devin Clark, and Hani Yahya, Matthew Lopez, both perfect EPD fights. Tons of qualifiers, which I talk about in my bet packs. Tons of qualifiers for those matchups, so I was on those hard. The unfortunate thing is we got into a shitload of upsets the rest of the way, with the exclusion of one of the ones I picked, Cody Pfister, to win, which was disappointing. But a couple comebacks too. We saw, especially with Nakamura, picking up the come-from-behind victory over Kyle Noak. Noak was off to a good start, looking good early, and nearly stopped him with his first punch of the fight. Didn't transpire that way. I did have Nakamura and Courtney Casey, 2 fighters I really looked at hard for predicting to win. They were both listed as counter bets. Fighters I said, you know what? If you get the opportunity to bet these guys under the right circumstances, it's certainly worth the money. And I was disappointed that I didn't stick with Casey because I really thought she had all the tools to do it. And Christina Stanchu just had a bad night. She looked horrible. And I don't know what the situation was. She took a couple shots, and that's what you get when you get young girls who are, any fighter who has dominated her opponents throughout their young career, and then they run into an ass kicking like Courtney Casey gave her. They don't know how to respond, and boom, the fight's over before they really know what hit them. As far as my bet packs were concerned, bronze went 3 of 4, and the wild card I had 2 of 3, both huge opportunities, and they just fell short of cashing in. And that was disappointing, to say the least. Props, I went 5-2, so that was pretty solid. So the betbacks weren't a total loss. Like I said, they were close. No cigar. Again, it's gambling. I can't sell it to you any other way. And a lot of people like to point out to me, well, you really promote the shit out of your successful nights, and you don't talk about your bad nights. Well, I don't talk. They're still there. I still post all the results, and I talk. I do talk about them now, but that's not how business works. If I run a restaurant and I have a hamburger that's delicious and everybody loves it, and then I have a cod sandwich that's fucking been ordered twice and tastes like dog shit warmed over, I'm not going to put that cod sandwich on the front of my menu. And at the, you know what I mean? You promote the good stuff, and the losses are there to look at, and the losses are there to weigh against my wins. But I'm going to talk about, this is where I've done really well. Judge me on my winners, okay? Yeah, I know, what's his face from Wolf of Wall Street said, judge me on my losers, but judge me on my winners. When we win, look at what we win. When we lose, yeah, we lose, and everybody loses. And the people that don't lose are either full of fucking shit, or they're the type of guys who look at it and say, oh, well, I'm going to give you, this is the prediction I'm going to take. I'm going to tell you to take Sam Alvey and Tony Ferguson, parlay those two together and put your life savings down on those two. So if your life savings is $1 million, you're going to walk away with $15 in profit, but it's a winner, and I'm a winner. No, fuck, you're a loser. But that's the way it works. I like to cash with big winners. I also put forward, that's why I put the gold one. Here's one that has a very good chance of winning. It's not going to be a huge winner, but it's still going to be a winner. It has a good chance to be a winner. I also like to hammer home, here are the long shots that can really make you bank, and I think that's what people like, and that's why my bet pack numbers are going through the roof. Even after I lose, people still show up to buy them. So thank you for sticking with me. Quickly touching on some of the fights. Louis Smoka looked fantastic against Ben Wynn, a very tough and dangerous opponent, picked up a solid win. How does that translate for him moving forward? Certainly, you always question, you measure these guys against the champion. Demetrius Johnson's a monster. He's a beast. He doesn't get the respect he should. Where does Smoka fit in? Well, he's got a long way to go before he gets a title shot, but he's certainly on the right track. Tim Boach, good for him, picking up a tough win over Josh Saman, showing he still has a lot. Josh Salmon, whatever you want to call him. Josh Tuna. Tim Boach, the Barbarian, showing he's still got some left in the tank against the proper opposition. He's not fighting at the top level anymore, but good for Tim Boach. Tony Ferguson versus Lando Venata. That was a fantastic matchup. That should have been on UFC 200, and that's why it's not scripted. We have relative nobody in Lando Venata coming in, stepping in on short notice, fighting Tony Ferguson in one of the best fights we've seen in a long time. Better than a lot of fights that took place at UFC 200, but nobody would have lined up to see that fight on the main card or even on the prelims at UFC 200. Nonetheless, Lando Venata had a very good accounting for himself. Tony Ferguson, his high-risk style almost cost him. It got the job done eventually. I was all over the prop. Tony Ferguson by submission. It played plus money. Get in on that shit. And it paid off. But his high-risk style almost got him stopped. And you wonder if he fights a guy like Eddie Alvarez, yeah, it's exhausting to deal with. But does it open him up too much to taking too much damage that will lead to him getting finished by top-quality competition? We'll see. I don't know. John Lineker and Michael McDonald took some abuse a little bit online for people making fun of me for taking Lineker to stop him by knockout. He stopped him by knockout. First round. Drew McDonald into a firefight. Better chin. Hits harder. McDonald, for all his length, did not use a jab, did not use his technical capabilities to keep Lineker at bay. Got drawn into that throwdown and got the worst of it. Good for John Lineker. I was on the under in that matchup. It was an easy, I'm not going to say it's an easy cash. Anything is a fucking crapshoot. You can do your research all you want. Things can go sideways in a hurry. So, nonetheless, John Lineker picking up a big win. But, as Robin Black pointed out online, where is he at as far as contending for a title? He called it Dominic Cruz. If you can't hit Dominic Cruz, I don't care how hard you hit. It don't matter. It don't mean shit. If you can't put knuckles on him, you're not going to beat him. So John Lineker a legitimate contender? Well, he's a guy who's moving up the ranks. Is he a legitimate threat to the champion? As of right now, I don't think so. How about John Lineker versus TJ Dillashaw? Over 5 rounds. If you beat TJ Dillashaw, if you're John Lineker, well, then we'll talk. Then we'll see if you're ready to fight for the title, to face Dominic Cruz. That's a great stepping stone. If you take out John Lineker, absolutely. Or if you want to you take out TJ Dillashaw if you're John Lineker. If you want to go one step, John Dodson, John Lineker. Because he fights a style, it's elusive. It's like a bridge. Dodson, you take out Dodson, you beat Dodson, well, let's go TJ. You take out TJ, absolutely. You get your shot at Dominic Cruz. I talked about the fight. I posted online, how about Lineker versus Garbrandt, the fight that never was? Yeah, different style of fighting. Garbrandt's right there to be hit. And Lineker is showing right now that if he hits you, you are in some serious fucking trouble. That's what it comes down to. So that's my breakdown of UFC Fight Night 91. And again, 5-7. Overall, just doing the quick math, 16-5, 26. I went 26-19 over 4 days. Not good. I was hoping to at least hit 30 wins. And it looked like I was well on my way to doing that. It just didn't transpire that way. So it's disappointing. A lot of fights, no excuses, just a lot of fights to break down. And I really, you had to curtail some of your work. I actually felt really good about UFC Fight Night 91 going into it. But 8 underdogs. Who's predicting 8 underdogs? If you're predicting 8 underdogs, you're a fucking moron. It happens, but you're just throwing fucking baloney at the wall and hoping it sticks. That's what it comes down to. So there you go. And I'm sure there'll be somebody, I got them all right. Good for you. That's fantastic. Let's hear your next 5 shows where you pick 8 underdogs and none of them hit, or 2 of the 8 hit and you look like a moron. That's the way it goes. All right, let's get to the conclusion. Is that right? I did make some quick notes, things I wanted to touch upon in my ending. There's some talk of Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo. I'd love to see it. That'd be a fantastic fight. Dominic Cruz certainly would give Jose Aldo a lot of trouble. It could also be a boring as hell fight where neither guy wants to commit and attack, and we get 5 rounds of bullshit. So we'll see how that goes forward. Michael Bisping versus Dan Henderson for the UFC's middleweight title. I fully anticipated this happening. As soon as the rumbling started, I figured they want to give Bisping an opportunity to fight somebody. This is Dan's one chance with a big win over Hector Lombard to go out and fight for the title, possibly win the title, which would be crazy, and then retire. Michael Bisping, an opportunity to get a measure of revenge against the guy who highlight reeled him a couple of years ago, and maybe build a little consistency in the division before we get into that mix of Jacare Souza, Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, and so forth. UFC on Fox 20. Losing that co-main event, Glover Teixeira versus Rumble Johnson, certainly hurt. Still looking forward to it. Still working on breaking it down. You can see my site slowly taking the shape of promoting that event, so you can check that out. Bet packs will be for sale as always. The subscription is coming to an end shortly. There's 2 left, so you can save a few dollars and get the next 2 cards. UFC 201 looks pretty damn good. And then we'll move into August and go from there. Follow me on Twitter, KO_predictions. I tweet as much as I possibly can. I have a young family, so sometimes I'm not able to tweet during all fights, and sometimes I'm simply exhausted from looking after them that I'm unable to post constantly. But when I'm up to it, I post as much as I possibly can. Also on Facebook, you can search out Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. I do a lot of posting on there as well, both my content and just sharing stuff that I see, news that pops up. And I'm very, you can approach me and talk to me on there all the time. I'm always there replying to messages. So if you want to get a hold of me, that's an absolute easy way to do it. YouTube, you can follow me on YouTube as well. I've seen my subscribers. I'm over 1,300 subscribers, which I'm happy about. It's definitely slowed down of late, because people know, oh, I don't need to subscribe to his YouTube channel. It's all on his Facebook page, or it's all on his website, and that's where they go. So whatever, it's good. My views are good. I get a lot of thumbs up. Sometimes I get a lot of thumbs down. I don't care. That's the way it goes, right? And yeah, just thanks, guys. I appreciate all the comments, the messages back and forth. People tell me about the good times. People tell me about the bad times. They call me on my shit when I don't do well. They're right there. These same people are right there to say, hey, heck of a good job. Thank you very much for everything you posted last night, and it was a big winner, or no, it was a big loser, and you're a fucking retard, but I respect you. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I respect you too. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting back to the one event every week, and I'm looking forward to a bit of a break as well. So we'll check that out as well. Thanks, guys, for tuning in, and keep tuning in. Take care.